Hello, we're just sitting here by the tree reading Christmas stories. I have a cup of holiday herbal tea in one of my favorite mugs instead of a guest for this reading. Our story this time is The Invisible Christmas Trees, written by William Barthel. Barthel, who knows? It's a fine story, I say. A few days after Thanksgiving of 1945, my wife's Uncle Bob Stevens bundled 230 Christmas trees into an old truck and headed from Maine for New York City to make his fortune. That was the way he put it, but what he meant was he wanted to earn enough money to give his mother and three sisters a very Merry Christmas, the first peacetime Christmas in 4 years. His father died at sea early in the war, and Bob had spent the previous Christmas in the woods near Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge. He reached New York on a dark and windy afternoon. As he drove up and down the avenues, what he noticed most was all the fir trees nodding to his fir trees from street corners, storefronts, and parking lots. It seemed that a great many people were out to make their fortunes selling Christmas trees that year. It was dusk when he arrived by chance in Greenwich Village. He parked and tucked a large flat parcel under his arm. Tucking a large flat parcel under his arm, began wandering through the meandering streets with their colorful shops and lively people. Down one narrow street he discovered a small Italian delicatessen, brightly lit, with a narrow concrete patio in front that was probably used for outdoor tables in summer. It would be a great place to sell treats. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant. Salami, sausages, and cheeses hung in festive rows above the counter. Holiday cookies filled a glass case, and crusty breads were piled in straw baskets. Bob inhaled and grinned and stayed his business, offering Old Joe, the owner, a percentage on every tree sold. Old Joe conferred with young Joe and Mama, a solemn woman in a black dress and white apron, who regarded Bob with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity about the package under his arm. "Let me show you my sign," Bob said. He tore away the wrapping to reveal a homemade wooden panel with the words "Christmas trees for sale" in shiny red and green letters. But Bob hadn't stopped at that. The sign was filled to overflowing with exuberant scenes of a New England Christmas. Carolers and shoppers strolled between the letters. The O in "for" was a skating pond alive with children. There was a snowy barn with a Christmas tree on the roof and a horse-drawn sleigh ride, a church. On the left of the sign, it was Christmas Eve. On the right, Christmas morning. At the top, Santa and all his reindeer rode the moonlit sky. Bob had created an American primitive, touched with innocence and joy. Right out of the sales ledger. Young Joe and Mama were smiling when Old Joe held out his hand to Bob. "You will sell your Christmas trees here," he said. Bob left the sign with Old Joe and went back to where he had parked his truck, tired but happy. But there was only a bow in the gutter at his feet. The truck was gone. Somebody directed him to the police station on Charles Street. The sergeant on duty didn't seem at all surprised to hear about a stolen truck full of Christmas trees. Now that might qualify as perishable cargo, he said. "I sure hope you find them before Christmas, because you don't get much call for them after." Bob thought the sergeant had the pronoun wrong. He was hoping they were going to find them. "Shouldn't be so hard to locate an old truck with a Maine license plate loaded with Christmas trees," he said. "4th of July, maybe, but right now, figure it out, buddy." Bob had only a few dollars in his pocket, and the bank had loaned him the money to buy the trees. He had a bad night's sleep in a rooming house, and went back to the police station early in the morning. No luck. He walked glumly to the store, and saw the two Joes hanging the sign outside on the patio. Soon they were draping a string of Christmas lights along the top and sides. It looked terrific. When Old Joe heard the story, he patted Bob's shoulder and took young Joe aside. Bob was still staring at the sign. He had no idea that something right out of old Henry was about to happen to him. It was only 9 in the morning, but down the street came a dapper gentleman, walking very slowly, taking time to avoid objects in his path which he alone could see. He was already tipsy at this early hour, and at his heel was a limousine driven by an anxious chauffeur. The man saw Bob's Christmas tree sign. He read it carefully and turned to regard the empty patio. "Best Christmas trees I ever saw," he said. "Can't beat 'em." The man kept staring. "Wonderful trees," he said. "Can't make up my mind. I'll take them all." The chauffeur had stopped the car and was holding the rear door open. "Burton," the man said, "put those trees in the back." Then he turned to Bob and put something in his jacket pocket. "That should cover it," he said. In spite of his troubles, Bob laughed as the car pulled away. Then he put his hand in his pocket and felt a crumpled ball of paper. It was a $20 bill. "Now let me ask you, what's a $20 bill worth in 1945? "Little bit more than now."
That's for sure.
Okay, maybe a lot more. Yes. So he just received $20 for his Christmas trees. But you remember he borrowed 200. Oh, it doesn't say. He bought 230 trees. We don't know how much. It was against Bob's nature to get something for nothing. He ran to the corner, but the limousine was already out of sight. When he returned to the sign, a tall, dark-haired girl was studying intently, her cheeks colored by the cold, her eyes smiling. "Did you paint this?" she asked. Bob nodded. "It's marvelous, but where are the Christmas trees?" "Just sold every last one of them." Bob found himself telling her what had happened. "I guess I can afford to wait around another day or two," he said. "But then I'll have to take a bus home." "Oh, don't quit. You don't have to stop selling Christmas trees just because you haven't got any." The girl was hurrying away. "Wait," Bob called after her. "My name's Bob. What's yours?" She looked back with a laugh. "You may not believe me, but my name is Holly." She disappeared around the corner, leaving Bob to wonder what her words meant. You don't have to stop selling Christmas trees just because. Bob bounded into the store. "Hey, Joe, would a town like this have a lumber yard?" There was a lumber yard on East 12th Street. Bob spent most of the $20 getting 100 pieces of clear pine cut on a jigsaw, each 6 inches tall. He bought brushes and quick-drying paints at an art store and worked all day and most of the night. The next morning he had Christmas trees for sale, all trimmed in his primitive style, with tiny ornaments and candy canes, toy drums and horns, Christmas stars, and angels. Old Joe brought the outdoor tables up from the cellar, and Mama covered them with bright green cloths to display Bob's trees. He sold them for stocking stuffers, ornaments, table decorations, and he used the profits for supplies to make new trees. Then he kept looking for the girl. He didn't see her again until the middle of December. She came by in a rush, her arms full of books, looking even prettier than before. She looked at Bob's trees and flashed him the V for Victory sign. "They're wonderful, Bob. Now personalize them." "What?" "Just decorate one side. Paint the other a pretty color, but leave it blank. Then you can put a girl's or boy's name on it, or anybody's name, to order." "Say," Bob laughed, "who are you, anyway?" "Just a schoolgirl." She told him the name of the university she was attending, and then was gone before he could ask her address. The personalized Christmas trees were even more popular than the others. What everybody liked best, though, was the Christmas tree sign. Several people wanted to buy it, and the owner of an art gallery on 8th Street offered him $75 for it. Bob said he'd sure think about it. He began taking the sign to his room at night, saying he wanted to work on it some more. The day before Christmas Eve, Bob got a present from the New York City Police Department. They'd found his truck behind a deserted warehouse in Brooklyn. The trees were gone, but nothing had happened to the truck. There was even half a tank of gas. It was time to head home. Bob personalized trees for old Joe and young Joe and Mama. Then he settled up accounts. "What about the sign, Bob?" old Joe asked. "You take it over to 8th Street and you got yourself $75. Bob took the sign down and polished it lightly with his sleeve. My luck, he thought. It's the end of an era, a voice said behind him. "Holly, I was just going to have Give this to Joe to keep for you. I knew you'd be by. He turned the sign over and handed it to her. I personalized it, he said. On the back of the sign was the word Holly, surrounded by pictures of a dark-haired girl celebrating Christmas in New York. She dashed in and out of the letters with her arms full of presents. She ran up to a sidewalk Santa, bustled into a village toy shop, hurried past the tree in the Rockefeller Center. She was off on a dozen holiday errands, east side, west side, all around the town. I'll love it all my life, Bob. Holly, let's have lunch before I go. He saw her hesitate and knew she was expected somewhere. You know how you always look, he said. You always look like you're double parked. All right, wise guy, just let me make a phone call. They had lunch in a restaurant owned by old Joe's cousin, a real Christmas feast. Bob told Holly a little about the war, how it was good being back home in Maine, but jobs were scarce and he had no idea what he was going to do with the rest of his life. What would you be, Holly asked, if you could be anything? Bob hesitated. I spent some time at the battalion aid station, he said. Nothing serious. I was what you call walking wounded, and a doctor commandeered me to assist him. He worked for a stretch of 60 hours before he keeled over. If I could be anything. Holly leaned across the table and touched his arm. You certainly have the hands for it, she said. Then her eyes flashed fire. Well, don't think you can't do it just because you don't think you can do it. It was another of her curious pronouncements, and the words were already stuck in his mind. Bob spent the rest of the day Christmas shopping, then headed home. His truck a Santa's sleigh. The family celebrated Christmas for days. Just like we're doing here. Celebrating Christmas for days. Days and days. What a good idea. When Bob stopped in the bank to repay his loan and open a savings account for $216, the bank president was impressed. He asked Bob about his future plans, and the words spilled out as Bob told him how much he wanted to go back to New York to medical school. That night, the banker talked with 2 other citizens of the town. Some long-term loans were offered to supplement Bob's GI benefits. It turned out to be a great investment for Maine. Today, 30 years later, my wife's uncle Bob Stevens is a Maine doctor in the old-fashioned sense of the word, working too many days and nights, but he still finds time for painting, and his style remains deceptively simple and clear. Some of his most treasured paintings are of weddings and receptions. All of Bob's sisters are married, and at reunions they tease him because he has just the right touch of gray at the temples and because his tailor-made clothes hang so well in his lanky frame. Sometimes Bob's mother joins in the kidding, saying he'll soon be setting a practice on Park Avenue. Truth is, Bob does look as if he's been a distinguished doctor all his life. If he said he was once a penniless painter selling Christmas trees in Greenwich Village, I don't know who'd believe him, except my wife's Aunt Holly. The